In today's video, we have a lot of prospect signings to discuss, plus we have another signing in Minnesota, and we have the fallout of the New York Rangers losing in the first round. What changes could we see in the Big Apple? Could we see a coaching change? Could we see some significant trades? Could Alexis Lafreniere end up in Montreal? We'll discuss all the possibilities coming up next. So welcome back to another video here, Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned today, we're kicking off round 2 of the 2023 NHL Stanley Cup Playoffs. We saw round 1 completed last night with the Devils beating the Rangers 4-0. Obviously, Igor Shesterkin was about the only bright spot for the Rangers. All their top stars really didn't have a great game, close to a no-show. Very disappointing for Rangers fans, Rangers management, and of course ownership. And we'll talk about the Rangers here and some potential follow-up and changes that we might see in just a little bit. But we also have some signings, including some prospects and NHL roster players. And today as well, we had the Minnesota Wild announce today that they've extended Marcus Johansson, who they acquired at the NHL trade deadline. He gets a 2-year contract extension at $2 million per season. Obviously, the Wild have a very limited amount of money to spend this offseason, so certainly prioritizing him was something they felt was important. Guys like Matt Dumba, for example, or Sundqvist, they're pretty much done. There's a possibility Ryan Reeves may be re-signed, but otherwise it's going to be interesting to see what the Wild do. Maybe try to find a way to clear up some much-needed cap space, but they're being hit pretty hard, of course, with the buyout penalties from the Parisi and Suter and contract buyouts that they did a few years back. It really escalates here going into next season. We also got news today from the Philadelphia Flyers, or on the Flyers prospect, goaltender Ivan Fedotov, who was expected to come to North America and play with the Flyers this past year, ended up not coming over at all, and ended up, I'm not really sure how to explain what happened. This is really kind of confusing, but essentially he ended up having to do military service over in Russia, and he ended up in some legal issues, and they prevented him from making the jump to North America. Now he's completed his time in the Army, and now the CSKA team that he was previously affiliated with is saying that they're going to welcome him back and are welcoming him to play the rest of his career there. So that's certainly substantial news. So will the Flyers ever be able to get him to come to North America and join their team? It's really difficult to say. I don't know what to make of that, but it doesn't sound like he'll be going to the NHL anytime soon. We also saw a signing in San Jose as well. They signed another Russian goaltender, which is actually Georgy Romanov, who's a 6'4", 23-year-old Russian goalie prospect. Mostly played last year in the VHL, which is a tier down from the KHL, but he did see a little bit of KHL time. The 23-year-old netminder will likely compete for a spot possibly between San Jose or the American Hockey League. Goaltending in San Jose is very much up in the air right now. They have Capo Kakinen, but James Reimers, they're testing for agency, and it's not really clear who their tandem is going to be between the NHL and the AHL. So we'll see how this goalie prospect from Russia works out for San Jose. A few other notes, too, regarding some players around the NHL. We did get some injury updates out of Tampa. I know a lot of people were saying that Tanner Jeannot, who they likely paid a pretty penny for, including, I believe it was a total of 5 draft picks to Nashville to acquire him at the NHL trade deadline. There were basically people thought he was a healthy scratch because he did miss a couple of games in the Maple Leaf series, and now Tampa is saying he was actually dealing with a high ankle sprain. So I guess that's not a case of him being a healthy scratch, but certainly being banged up. And between him and Yzerman, when they were kind of going back and forth, Yzerman ended up getting rocked and had a bit of a concussion for obviously a period of time as well. So they kind of rotated those two guys in and out, but they were both dealing with their own medical issues separately. So I'm not sure we can really fair to judge him being a healthy scratch after the hefty price tag that they paid to make the acquisition. Now, there is some talk on a guy like Stan Bowman, former Blackhawks general manager, possibly making a return to the NHL. Now, make it clear that as of right now, Stan Bowman and Joe Quenneville, for that matter, neither from the former Blackhawks regime, have been cleared to rejoin and get an NHL job. Now, they're technically not suspended either, but I believe the conditions of their removal from their positions when everything happened in the Kyle Beach saga was that they had to be given clearance by Commissioner Gary Bettman to take any other future job opportunities in the NHL, and they'd have to go in for a meeting and basically be interviewed and demonstrate, I guess, that they've learned and what they've done to better themselves, etc., before they can have those opportunities. Now, in Stan Bowman's case, it's speculated that he might be connected to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Obviously, the Bowman name and his dad, Scotty Bowman, of course, was connected to the Penguins for a long time before. And then it might not be their open spot as general manager. It might be a different role within the front office or executive world and within their team. So not maybe more like the Brian Burke spot where Brian Burke was president of hockey ops, maybe something along those lines. Either way, Stan Bowman is connected to the Penguins. We'll see if that turns into anything. We will likely get word or hear through NHL insiders or reports that they're seeking, the ability to hire him if it gets to that. But we'll have to watch that for further developments. Now, speaking of which, Joel Quenneville, who's also, in the same kind of predicament here as Stan Bowman, his name is surfacing as well. Now, apparently he, according to some, including Darren Dreger, really wants to get back into coaching. And there is some speculation after the following 7 games of the Devils of the New York Rangers might make a coaching change. Now, if you take a look at Gerard Gallant and his 2 seasons behind the bench, his regular season record was really, really good. But of course, after a conference finals appearance last year, and now a first round exodus after stocking up the way they did at the deadline, they added Patrick Kane, Vladimir Tarasenko, they added Tyler Mond, they added Niko Mikkola, and they came up short. They went way shorter playoff run than they did last year. So certainly that was not the expectation. And there's already word that there is a possibility that Gerard Gallant might be let go and that they might be interested in trying to see if they can hire Joel Quenneville. No guarantees that's what happens, but there's, I think, the bigger part of this that seems to be more likely is that Gallant is replaced behind the bench. Now, apparently earlier in the season, in the early part of the year, when the Rangers got off to a poor start and were struggling, apparently there was some rumors and speculation that they were considering making a change even then. Now, owner James Dolan is very erratic and makes quick decisions, not very patient man, so to speak. We know Chris Drury's kind of fiery, looking to make his moves and get the Stanley Cup into the Big Apple as quickly as possible. So they're kind of ruthless in that sense, which is not overly shocking or surprising to hear, I'm sure, especially people who are following the Rangers quite closely. So we could possibly see a coaching change. I would suspect if it's going to happen, that it's likely going to be announced within the next couple of days. Typically, you don't see a long period of time. I mean, Drury may want to take some time, do the exit interviews with the team at the end of the year here, and kind of make his own decision over the next couple of days. I don't know. We'll have to wait and find out, but there's already speculation that I picked up earlier in the year that Gallant could be on the hot seat. So we'll have to see if that's truly the case or not. And if he is, if Joel Quenneville is a potential candidate, that they would go to Gary Bettman and seek for him to get clearance to be hired to be the next head coach of the New York Rangers. We'll have to wait and see on that. At this point, it looks like it's pretty clear Patrick Kane most likely is not returning. Now, the other part I want to talk about is Alexis Lafreniere. Now, the Rangers had a lot of players struggle, and there's a lot of speculation what the Rangers could do. Now, this is a combination of reports that have kind of come to these consensus on what we're going to talk about here. There's an article in here, post from Larry Brooks, that we looked at and potential changes. Listened to an interview on the Jeff Merritt show from Vince Mercogliano, who obviously covers the Rangers as well. And there's also some talk on Montreal radio from Georges Larac about what the Habs should do and if they should target a player like Lafreniere with their first-round pick. So when you take it all together, the Rangers media are saying that there likely will be some substantial change in New York. They're not going to settle for a first-round exit after the way they've gone through their rebuild and gone to the conference finals last year and just take a major step back and just like that, have no serious consequences or significant moves. So that's why the speculation on the coaching change is probably pretty high. We'll see if Gallant survives, but based on what all the reports suggest, it doesn't look good. Now, according to the other reports, so they could go about making a significant shakeup to the roster in a variety of ways here. Like we said, there's a good chance that Tarasenko and Kane won't be back. Now, you take a look at guys like Artemi Panarin. That's 2 years in a row. He didn't really have a great playoff. The numbers are not horrific if you just look at the stat line, but if you watch him play and you see the impact, it's not anything like the regular season. He seems to be a little bit more timid, and he's not really using his full skill set, in my opinion, and it just hasn't been the Artemi Panarin you're used to and the dynamic player that you see in the regular season. So, there's that. Kreider and Zibanejad were certainly disappointing as well. And, you could see a shakeup amongst the core group of the veteran guys. So there was talk of going about things in that way. Maybe Drury pulls off a big trade. Maybe a significant player goes out and something else more significant comes in, a swap. Maybe they find a hockey trade across the NHL somewhere. Or the kid line didn't really produce either. And at what point are they going to look at Capo Caco and Alexis Lafreniere and say this was a first overall and a second overall pick? They've had plenty of time in the NHL. We're not elevating them to be more than third-line players based on our depth of our team. Maybe they're not really producing anything like we expected them to. Maybe we have to cut bait here and make a trade with one of these guys. Now, of course, that takes us to Montreal. Now, we know that Jeff Gorton, of course, was heavily involved with the Rangers as their GM and was a part of those drafts that brought those players in. Now, Georges Laraque on the Montreal radio, where they were talking about, would you trade their Montreal's first-round picks and do like a trade we seen last year at the NHL draft? Of course, we saw them pick up Kirby Dach from Chicago. They sent Romanov to the Islanders for a first-round pick and then flipped that to the Blackhawks for Dach. Now, of course, Montreal has their own first-round pick this year, and, of course, they have the one of the Florida Panthers. So there's talk about trading the Florida pick and maybe something with it, some combination of their prospect pool. We don't know what it would be exactly, to bring in Pierre-Luc Dubois from Winnipeg. We know Dubois wants to be in Montreal more than anything. It seems like, from what we've heard, Montreal is interested. We don't know that 100%, but it's been speculated for the better part of a year plus that Dubois will end up in Montreal likely this summer. Okay, we know Winnipeg is going to be going through some changes. They had not a great finish of their season, and change is very much needed in that city, that team as well. So it makes sense that Dubois and the Canadiens might get connected here. Now, what the return would be exactly, we don't know, but I'm sure part of it at least would be a first-round pick. So let's say that, so according to Georges Laraque and his friends on the radio that they were talking to, they still suggested doing the Dubois trade and using the lower first-round pick and, possibly something else in the prospect pool to the Winnipeg Jets to acquire Dubois, and then to use their own first-round pick, assuming they don't win the lottery, of course. If they, finish first or second and get one of those two lottery spots, that would certainly be a game changer. I don't see them trading the pick at that point for Lafreniere or anybody else for that matter. But if they ended up right now, they're going to be between 5 and 7. If they, depending on who the teams were that win the lottery spots, they could anywhere be 5, 6, or so. So if they're staying in that range, Laraque is suggesting that he would trade that pick for Lafreniere. So then you could have a top 6 in Montreal if the Rangers accepted that trade, of course. They'd have Suzuki and Caulfield, along with Lafreniere, along with Kirby Dach, along with Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Juraj Slafkovsky. That's your top 6. They're all young players. They're all, very talented, very skilled, and can give them a top 6 to compete with some of the top teams coming out of rebuilds and cross their division and into the NHL. If you look at the top 6 that are teams like the Sabres and the Senators that are coming out of rebuilds now and challenging for playoffs, that would be able to rival, assuming these players all play to their potential, of course. They have an opportunity where they could rival those top 6 groups and, make some big steps very quickly. So it does make sense depending on where things go. Now, would the Rangers trade Lafreniere for sure? We don't know. But I know listening to the interview of Vince Mercogliano, he didn't rule it out. He thought maybe at first he was saying about how maybe making a trade be shakeout with one of the veteran players going out. But then he went on to reference the kid line and that maybe one of those two top first overall or second overall picks between Lafreniere and Caco, maybe they go. He said it wouldn't shock him if that's the case. We know the Rangers are not afraid to be aggressive and make big moves. And hey, this is a team in Montreal that's very familiar with these players, considering who's running the Habs now. So does it make sense that it could work out? It certainly could. If you take a look at the draft in 2023 and where the Montreal Canadiens are, and depending on who's on the board, if there's a player there that they think could be an impact player, within a year, okay, maybe they don't make the trade and maybe they keep the pick. But, if they happen to fall to 6 or 7, I mean, to be honest, there's going to be some good players there for sure. But I don't know that any of them are going to have an impact on the NHL for a couple of years. And if they're confident that Lafreniere has not been given the right opportunity and they can help him find his game and really step forward, then they probably do offer it up and take a chance on making a trade of that nature. So let me know your thoughts on the possibilities. Should the Montreal Canadiens look to use both of their first-round picks, bring in Pierre-Luc Dubois, bring in Alexis Lafreniere, solidify a brand new top six for the Canadiens moving forward, and have this young group that they can continue to build around for the foreseeable future as they accelerate the rebuild? Let me know your thoughts on that scenario down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.